It says live on YouTube.
Go for it.
Are we starting?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everybody. We are broadcasting live from YouTube today instead of Facebook due to technical difficulties, but I'm glad that we have the other alternative. I want to introduce my guest today is David Zavak. Wave, say hey. David is Marcy Kaptur's legislative aide in the Toledo office, and he's been there for about 2.5 years. I met him earlier on when I was still thinking through whether or not I wanted to run for office, and it's nice to be able to have him back. We are going to talk about the debate that went on last night between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And I understand, David, that you used to do color commentary for basketball games in high school.
I did, yeah. When I was teaching St. John's, where I taught, pretty good basketball program. And so we had like little radio outfits set up, and so we'd call some of the games, which was fun because when you teach the kids and then you're kind of calling them when they're playing the games, you never want to say anything bad about them, because so it's a good way to always put a positive spin on what's going on. But yeah, happy to be here, and I think I work as Congresswoman Kaptur's sort of campaign coordinator, and I know that the Congresswoman's been really thrilled with your campaign and everything you've been able to do in that part of Northwest Ohio, and happy to come on and talk about last night, as well as how you've been doing as well. So happy to be here. Thanks.
Thanks. So did you make it through the entire debate without like getting a drink or screaming?
No comment on the drink part, but but I did keep it on the whole time. Yeah. And I think, we have to sort of think about where like we come at it as people who really follow this and, care deeply about it versus, maybe a lot of our friends and family that, they'll turn on a debate every 4 years and, they have their beliefs about what government should or should not be. And, I think if we look at our Facebook feeds or we look at, the people we work with, nobody should really feel like that's what a debate should look like, right? I mean, I just think there's a raw, visceral reaction when there's so little respect towards the moderator, towards the opponent. And I don't really like it when people sort of both sides are really bad. I think what happens is when you have a president who is so uninterested in the work and so incapable of listening, whether it's to his opponent or to the moderator or to anyone, that's going to, there's going to be a level of cynicism where people are going to tune out the process entirely. And, that's not a form of voter suppression necessarily, right? But it causes distrust in the system, and it causes people to not feel good about government. Because
it's voter turnoff.
Right, yeah. So how could you turn that on and feel good about, where we are? And so I think that's kind of like the immediate, thought that I, had, as it's a bummer that, there's so little, if you're tuning in and you're, a 40-year-old, mother of three, or you're a 50-year-old, working class, guy trying to, figure out what COVID means for his employer or what, and you're just, you're trying to, what's the state of the nation, right? And so you go and you turn on, okay, well, what does the Democratic nominee have to say? What does the Republican nominee have to say about all of this, right? Because regardless of whether you even think COVID is real, whatever you wherever you come at it, right? There's very few people who have been unaffected by any of this.
Mhm.
And if you just turn on the TV and say, okay, well, let's figure out what people have to say, I think it would be really difficult to have watched that and and feel good. And that's
Yeah.
I think that's ultimately pretty sad. And I don't I think ultimately it's pretty clear where the blame for that belongs. But uh, I don't think I certainly don't think the president expanded his appeal last night.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. What did you see?
Similar, my stomach was just in the noise, the talking over each other, the chaos that's created, and it does become difficult to keep a objective view about where is the chaos coming from, because it just the whole scene is, yelling in voices, and at that point it's just one brawl. I put the comment in last night to the people I was watching. It reminded me like of a Punch and Judy, puppet show, but without the charm of the puppets. It was physically disturbing to me, emotionally disturbing. I tried to, at some points, click into what would people outside the United States watching this think of our country, and is this the view that we want to project? This is who we are right now. But I really felt badly that that was what was going to be translated to other people in other countries about the state of our democracy. I spent a lot of time thinking about things on the federal level, and I've had to bring my focus back down to the state level because that's the level where my race is. So today I thought, this is cool. I get to kind of go back up in that playground and legitimately talk about the presidential race, because that's obviously I've been more focused on what's happening in Columbus and on the state level. But it is just so critical that we not make the same mistake again.
Yeah, and I mean, your role, at the State House will be critical in terms of a few things that were discussed last night. There should have been way more things that were discussed. I think one of the disappointing things of last night is just how little policy there was, right? I mean,
Mhm.
in terms of, I don't think these sorts of things are ever super a ton of policy, gets thrown around. But last night, I mean, it was the closest that we got was really towards the end when they started to talk about, um, the Green New Deal and some of Vice President Biden's ideas. He hasn't endorsed the Green New Deal, but I think he's pretty much adopted a lot of those policies from the Green New Deal. Um, but even there, you kind of realized you did have a Fox News moderator because, he framed Vice President Biden's climate policies as big government, lots of spending, and even talked about things like weatherization programs
Mhm.
as though they were sort of this like radical idea. And
Mhm.
for people watching, the green, weatherization is literally just money that goes to home contractors to get people, windows that work and a
Mhm.
home
Mhm.
furnace to get them through the winter. I mean, I mean, in terms of stimulating spending, I mean, it's literally just money that goes to workers and improves the quality of life for people. And,
Mhm.
you know, I'm in a bubble, that's sort of what I work on. And so for me, I'm kind of like shocked, but, when you're at Ohio, the way that works is uh, Congresswoman Capter and Congress appropriate money to the Department of Energy. They send that over to the state of Ohio, and it'll be up to people like you to make sure that the state of Ohio is spending that money in a smart way. We um, are constantly trying to figure out, okay, money that's been earmarked by the Department of Transportation gets sent to the state of Ohio. is that money going to go to expand another highway? Or, how is the Department of Transportation, the Ohio Department of Transportation, going to spend those dollars? Is it going to be in a way that, promotes a green economy? Is it going to be in a way that,
Mhm,
and a lot of those decisions end up getting made at the state level. And
mhm,
if we're shut out there, uh, you know, these are things that impact people's lives.
mhm.
Not a whole lot of that last night, right? But
Right.
but it is what it is, I guess, at a certain point. But I do think there were some good moments for Vice President Biden. I think he was able to talk about both of his sons fairly, movingly.
Mhm,
One, to have a son who served his country and then went through a health experience where he passed away because of cancer.
mhm,
But also, we're in Ohio. We were hit pretty hard by opioids and addiction, and for him to be open about
mhm.
what his son has gone through and uh, has been challenging, and but but kind of going back to what you said, even those moments where there was some humanity and it was hard to even get there because of all of the talking over and the interrupting
Mhm.
and
I
it
liked hearing Biden say that he was proud of his son for
right.
going through that struggle and coming out the other end.
And I think if people were able to stomach it and sit through it, then I think that would come through. Um,
Mhm,
and I can certainly tell you, just looking at the way that the Trump campaign is talking today, they're mad at Chris Wallace, the moderator. They're mad at any number of people, but they're not talking in a way that they feel confident about how it went in any way, shape,
mhm,
or form.
mhm.
And I don't really even know how many, even in terms of clips that you can use to amplify. I don't know
Yep.
how many of those he even got. I saw the president try and say Biden refused to say law and order. Um,
Mhm.
okay, I mean that's fine, and that's one of his campaign themes.
Well,
His
let's
part,
look at that though. Let's look at that
yeah,
law and order. Okay, was there order last night? No.
no,
What was the laws for last night? 2 minutes, unrestricted, no.
yeah,
The person who wants everybody to be saying law and order is patently unable to control his own impulses to be quiet for 2 minutes. Yeah.
he
One
has,
of the things
and
that I look at, my frame of reference is I'm a therapist. I don't know if you remember that, but as a person who spends a lot more time looking at process and trying to analyze process, the process of what went on there was very indicative of just that's one irony that came out at me. Um, the rules that he agreed to, that both parties agreed to, that Chris Wallace consistently reminded him of, he's not able to follow. And I heard somebody say this morning that if their children were in the room and that if their children had behaved like that, they would have been punished. I was wondering, okay, we have two more debates ostensibly. We have a question about do you think that they'll cancel the next debate? People have posited that that's part of the strategy that President Trump, his strategy was be intrusive enough, be verbally aggressive enough to keep any concrete content from being able to be talked about. And I think he did, if that was his objective, he accomplished that. There was no true conversation back and forth about policy differences or what's happening. He obfuscated the entire time. So it leaves us with a horrible feeling. We want to turn it off. We want to tune it out. We don't want to come back for a second debate, which again sets up the stage that he doesn't have to be held accountable in that forum by somebody questioning him and holding his feet to the fire.
Yeah, and I think there will be another debate. I don't. The Biden campaign has already said they're not going to back out of it. I think they'd be too nervous about showing a sign of weakness, even if it's not a sign of weakness. I just think they have to keep doing it. To your point, I think if something really worried me about last night, um, it seemed like to me, playing armchair psychologist, which you shouldn't do. Um, it seemed to me like the president felt like he was doing everyone a favor just by showing up, and that it was all that he could do to listen to the moderator or listen to Biden. And kind of what you said about children, he sort of acted like an insolent school child, like he had to be there and he didn't want to have to do it, but if he was going to do it, then whatever. And I guess what worries me about that point of view is he does not seem like he feels like he needs to persuade voters. And if he doesn't feel like he needs to persuade voters, why is that? And I don't think that it's because he has some super secret inside info that the polls are 100% wrong and he's actually winning. I don't think that's what it is. But I do think that he feels like whether it's through voter suppression or whether it's through appealing through the courts, I do wonder how confident he is about the things that he's done around the margins to insulate himself from public accountability, because he seemed like a pretty comfortable guy in a way that I didn't. Now, again, the answer to that is, if you look at the way that the Trump campaign is acting today, they seem pretty nervous. They don't seem happy about where they're at. They don't seem confident. And Chris Christie, I think said, the former governor of New Jersey that's on the Trump team, he said, our strategy did not work. We can't do that again. And so I think President Trump might be believing some of his own thoughts about, that he's Teflon or that he's not impacted by these sorts of things. But most people around him seem to think that he is, and that's a positive.
The things that came across to me the biggest points were the refusal to denounce white supremacist behavior. And in fact, his comment that, I'm not on any Proud Boys sites, but I have heard through the pundits that they took that as we're in his favor, guys, and that they got the green light to stock up. That, as well as the patent refusal to, again, say that he would respect the right of the people to make a choice as to who's going to be sitting in that office in November. That theme is coming up over. I heard him say pretty clearly at the end of that conversation about white supremacists, this is not going to end well. This is not going to end well.
Yeah.
And that he does put out those truthful mirroring of what is his plans are. And it's very terrifying.
Yeah, I'd echo, what Quinn said in the comments about, that whole line of talk about the Proud Boys. I think there are moderate Republicans or people who are not as tuned into politics as, they don't follow the day by day necessarily, but when you are unable or unwilling, and we're on 3 years of this now, right? I mean, he's done this in Charlottesville. He's done this multiple times. I do think, in a way, people talk about, we started by saying the fear is that the cynicism could sort of depress turnout in terms of it turns people off of the whole system.
Right.
But I think in that case, he's depressing his own turnout, because I think, and you're the exact, neighborhoods and towns that you want to represent, Maumee, Sylvania. There are a lot of people who may find some aspects of the Republican Party personal responsibility, appealing, and limited government, spend within your means. Uh, but I do think that the type of voter who has a limit, right? And that limit is not being able to say white supremacism is bad, right? I mean, and I think it was fair to question whether or not those folks existed maybe 2 years ago, especially after Trump won in 2016. But I think in 2018, I think there was some clear movement in suburban neighborhoods, and long term, we have to figure out, how do we appeal to those people and keep them, interested in progressive policy. But for now, I think the president is hurting himself with those folks for sure.
Well, I definitely believe in personal responsibility, and I
Right,
believe
yeah,
in fiscal responsibility. Yeah, I tell people I have balanced my checkbook to the penny every single month since I was 17 years old. So I'm not about letting money get out of hand. I wanted to respond to a question or comment we got in from Greg. Is it worth voting third party during this election cycle? My reaction to that, Greg, is that people need to vote their consciences. And if you believe that neither of these people are what you want to have in the White House, and that's what you truly feel you have to, vote your conscience for another person, I'm not going to say that's a wasted vote. But it does concern me that I belong to this group called Rust Belt Rising, who does polling for the Midwest, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, sometimes Indiana. And out of the Midwest states, Ohio consistently shows more conservative, but the most recent thing was that we had more third party, or undecided is about 2% in all of those states, but Ohio had 5% for third party. The other states had 2%, 3%. We had the highest percentage of people that would abstain from voting for either of those two people. Strategically, there is that question of like looking at the big picture. Will your conscience feel better if you vote for that person that you prefer? Or will your conscience feel better knowing that I supported Joe Biden instead of President Trump, and that 5% difference in Ohio could be the difference between him getting the electoral votes from us or not? I can't answer that for individual people. I told a friend of mine, I will never, ever, come back at you if you vote third party and say you wasted your vote, because we need a different system. And these two people are not the best that we could offer from my perspective. But Joe Biden is head and shoulders above what we would have with another 4 years with Trump. And it seems like that should be easy for people to see. But again, I personally will not make anybody feel guilty if they say I can't in good conscience vote for the person that I think is the best choice.
I think that's really well said. Ultimately, the campaigns have to convince you to vote for them and to give you a reason to vote for them, or scare you enough about the other guy that that you come out and vote for them. But for me, it's also pretty simple. I'm going to vote for Joe Biden, and I think Congresswoman Capter is a very enthusiastic supporter of Vice President Biden. Just speaking for myself, the child tax credit for working families
Mm,
is $2,000 per year. Joe Biden wants to take that to $3,600
mm,
for kids under the age of 5 and $3,000 till the age of 18. I mean, that's a $1,600 tax cut that goes directly to working parents. There are estimates that could cut child poverty by as much as 45% in this country.
whoa.
So it's something that would help my family. It's something that I think would help families around the country. And I think if you're talking about stimulating the economy and you're
Mhm.
talking about tax policy, and this is sort of one of those things where you turn 30 and you get boring. But if you're talking about stimulating the economy, it's way more interesting to me to give money to working class folks and
Mhm.
people trying to raise families than it is, another cut on the estate tax or another cut on capital gains money. And so, even an issue that I think most voters perceive, oh, well, Republicans are for lower taxes. That's not even in line with what the parties support nowadays, right? Like, take Columbus, for example. John Kasich cut income taxes for the wealthiest Ohioans. His chief of staff said, because we're cutting these taxes for wealthy Ohioans down here in Columbus, your local government's going to have to raise property taxes. There's going to have to be more school levies.
Mhm.
In terms of public transportation, those
Mhm.
localities are on their own. For most Americans, the Republican Party wants to raise your taxes so that
Mhm.
they can give their buddies a haircut.
Mhm.
That's frustrating.
$70,000 in the income tax for hairstyling in the New York Times report, 70,000.
And
Okay, we are almost out of time. So, well, we are out of time. It's 1:31. So, um, you think that there will be another debate? I'm okay with another debate as long as both candidates are in soundproof booths and they only let the mics on for the 2 minutes that they're each allowed to talk.
they're going to have
And
to enforce
maybe with a
rules from that.
curtain that comes down so that we don't have to see the one person yelling and screaming while he's hearing what the other person is saying. So, I don't know. I mean, killing the mic doesn't sound like it'll go far enough. I'm not sure that that's the best solution. But any last thoughts that you want to say to folks out there?
I'm just really excited about you going down to Columbus.
Me
I think
too.
anytime, you don't want to get, too caught up in negative politics, but anytime you have a state representative that is a landlord and then goes and tries to change the law to make it easier for him to evict folks, that's not somebody that I want in office. And if you can replace that person, I think that's a win. I think Ohioans have been paying a corruption tax, where I've had to support corrupt school fraud. I've had to support corrupt energy bailout plans as an Ohio taxpayer. I'm sick of that, and I think you're part of the solution. And I know Congresswoman Capter's excited about you as well.
Thank you, David. I'm looking forward to it. I hope I'm not being overly optimistic, but I feel like I have support from the people that I'm talking to, and I'm really looking forward to a win.
One day at a time.
Yep. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you spending the time with us. Tonight, we are going to be talking at 7 o'clock with Rachel Coyle, who does a really neat I think of it as more of a podcast because there's so much, but it's a Facebook Live called How Things Work at the Ohio State House. And we will drill down a little bit more about there's so many commonalities about what's going on at the federal level and what's happening in Columbus. So we're going to talk about those similarities specifically with Ohio. So if you're not doing anything at 7 o'clock, come on back, and that will be from my campaign Facebook page if we get the technical thing worked out. Otherwise, we will broadcast that from the YouTube channel also. Thanks very much, folks. I appreciate you being here and listening to this. Take care and stay safe.